Book Splash.
Book Splash.
Book Splash. Book Splash.
Book Splash on Splash 105.5 FM.
My name is Uwasomba. Yes, the poem is titled Song. It is the first in a collection called A Handle for the Flautist. And it's the kind of poem you're asked if your country was a woman, what kind of poem would you write for her? It says, "You are the sandstorm beneath my skin, the salt in the raw bleeding flesh. You are the flagellation and the herb. You are the hurricane of my restless nights, the conversation that soon becomes an argument. You are the flagellation and the herb. Into your cup my life runs ever-flowingly. Into your agitated arms my jural mirror. You are the flagellation and the herb. And when I kneel, it is for you I crave. You are my song. I know no other." My name is Uwasomba. Keep listening to Book Splash on Splash FM.
With that poem from Uwasomba, I welcome you to Book Splash on the Integrity Station, Splash 105.5 FM. My name is Efelowapo Adeniyi. Last week was the World Book and Copyright Day, a day set aside to celebrate books of whatever form. Interestingly, that day was canonized for books also because it coincides with the anniversary of the birth and death of a man who shaped world literature immensely. And I'm talking about the man William Shakespeare, a man who during his life authored many plays and sonnets that reverberate around world literature today. And on Book Splash this day, we shall evaluate the writings of William Shakespeare and his relevance to the world and the present-day Nigerian society. I went in search of a scholar on Shakespeare, and that journey took me to Ile-Ife. Join me as I welcome Dr. Chijioke Uwasomba of the Department of English, Obafemi Awolowo University. So it's a pleasure to have you on the program, Dr. Chijioke Uwasomba.
Thank you, Ife. Good to have you.
Yes, I know you've been teaching Shakespeare for over 15 years now. How has the experience been like?
The experience has been extremely wonderful because, Shakespeare is a master of all. And so I feel privileged that I've been teaching Shakespeare in the last 15 years. I teach the plays and then, of course, the sonnets. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Sometimes, does it not become a bore knowing that you teach the same thing over and over again every year?
No, we don't teach the same thing over and over again. Remember that Shakespeare wrote about 37 plays, and then you have 154, sonnets. And so what we do is that we don't repeat the text, we don't repeat the poems, and there is something fascinating about Shakespeare that, each time you read any of Shakespeare's works, there's something new, there's something refreshing, there's something happy about Shakespeare that you can't be bored.
It's been centuries after the man William Shakespeare wrote his plays and his sonnets. Why does the world still celebrate him?
Yeah, the world celebrates, Shakespeare and his works because of what these works represent. So at any age, I'm sure even when we would have left, this sinful world, people will continue to study Shakespeare. There's something about his language. There's something about the issues. There's something global. There's something human. So in all departments of life, you find out that there is something to talk about, Shakespeare.
And are you not sure it's not about the volume that he produced while he was alive?
No, it doesn't have to do with the volume. I'm sure if he had even written 3, 4, 5 plays, the same thing, would have been. There is. If you look at Shakespeare's language, it's moving, it's poetic, it's dramatic, it's all consuming. That anybody who has flair, for aesthetics, who has flair for language, would want to identify himself or herself with Shakespeare.
Before we go deeply into Shakespeare as a person, some have said that even dramatists like Moliere and Beckett wrote better.
Well, it depends on what they mean. It depends on how they have read, those ones. Apparently because people tend to study Shakespeare more, than Moliere. They don't have the kind of visibility, that you have found with Shakespeare. But I think that having studied Shakespeare, having taught Shakespeare, I'll go for him, than Moliere.
Maybe that is your bias about Shakespeare.
Well, apparently it's my bias. But that not to write off, those other writers.
Well, you have been teaching Shakespeare for 15 years, like I earlier said. What do you tell your students is the most important reason why they have to study the man ages after he lived in literature?
Yeah, because of the universality, of issues that you find in Shakespearean literature. If you look at any of Shakespeare's works, take, for instance, the question, his last play, The Tempest, you would see that the issues regarding the relationship between, what you can consider as the core, and the periphery. In other words, you look at the international system, relationship, between what they call the international community, and dependent peripheral, states like Nigeria. So you see the relationship again in terms of class between the ruling class and the lower, class. So in all areas of life, you find there is something, that Shakespeare had to say about humanity. So much so that even though these plays were written some centuries, ago, you still find them useful, today in the explanation of the crisis of the world, in the explanation of the development of the world, in the explanation, of humanity in general.
But in looking at the merits in the works of William Shakespeare now, some will say it is only about language. Do you agree?
No, it's not only about language. There are issues about humanity, how human beings behave, how human beings relate to one another, issues of justice, issues of criminality, issues of usurpation of power. And there is nothing, as I have said, that you can't find in Shakespeare. I mean, what is language? Language is just a mere conveyor belt, of issues, of matters that you find in any work. It is true that Shakespeare's language is fantastic. But this language is a conveyor, belt of issues and matters that you find that are engaging about human beings. And these are workaday realities. They are workaday realities.
But still on the language, Dr. Uwasomba, some have said he wrote using the language that was used in his time, that there was really nothing spectacular about it when he wrote.
There was something spectacular about it, because I have talked about the nature of the language is poetic. And language is more felt. Language is touchy. Language is more useful. Language is, something that fulfills a lot of aspirations, a lot of values when it is poetic, in nature. And so that language is very luxuriating. And so even though it might be the ordinary language that was in use at that point in time, but it has become, something extremely poetic, very captivating in today's world.
And sometimes when your students pick up books of Shakespeare to read, do they find the language as fascinating as you have just described it?
They do. A good number of students, and especially when students find out that the teacher himself knows his or her onions in the delivery in class, you find out that the students, they tag along and be part of what is happening. So they do. They show interest. They are fascinated, by Shakespeare, and that's why it is compulsory for anybody who is taking a degree in English.
But why do you feel Shakespeare, in most of his tragedies, actually invoked the historical personalities?
Yes, he had to do that, but because these personalities were world historical figures. These were world historical figures, and I tell you that, in fact, even with his plays, Shakespeare, has also extended the narrative of these world historical, figures. So much so that when you read, these heroes in Shakespeare's plays, you would think that you are reading the history of these individuals. And so by writing and using these icons, these heroes, these big people, if you like, Shakespeare has promoted, the history of these individuals and the places, that they came from.
But why were weaklings the subject of his comedies?
Well, of course, you realize the essence of comedy. The essence of comedy is to be able to make people laugh with a view to teaching, some lesson. And so comedy is on a lighter level. And you need, to use such characters, such individuals, to be able to make the impact which comedy is supposed. So it's not a hard thing. It's not as hard, as tragedy. And so to be able to show the foibles, of man, of human beings, you need such, characters to be able to teach, to be able to lampoon, society with a view to ensuring that, changes will occur.
Book Splash.
Book Splash.
Book Splash.
Book Splash.
Book Splash on Splash 105.5 FM.
Well, this next question is very particular to me. I'd like to know how Shakespeare portrayed women in his works.
Yes, that's an aspect that people have been complaining about. Not just only women, even the lower class. The lower class is not given the type of attention, the type of place that you would expect, and again, given the patriarchal nature, of the society in question when he wrote. But also, don't forget that in the play that I talked about, the last play of Shakespeare, Tempest, you will also realize that the child, the lady there, is treated very well, by Shakespeare. And even when somebody wanted, to rape her, the attempt to ensure that, she is protected, can be seen. And so to that extent, if you look at Tempest, you then realize that there's an attempt, to play up a young girl who is virtuous, and Shakespeare made sure, that she is not, devoured by the man.
Well, can we call that a reparation?
I don't think it is. It's not a reparation.
Like Achebe did, using his own anthews of the savannah to remedy the way people said he portrayed women in his earlier novels.
Well, it is possible because the essence of criticism. When works are written, they are not meaningful until they are subjected to some critical analysis. And so it is possible that given the criticism that had attended, to Shakespeare's, work. So last play, as I said, which is the Tempest, it tried to engage in that kind of compensation and to ensure that people would then see that there was another aspect, to his kind of writing and to his own life, as well. And again, if you look at Shakespeare's sonnets, you'll also realize, that some of the sonnets talk about, a lady, while some talk about, a young man, and so people or critics will tend to see, Shakespeare as not reflecting, women as it ought to be. But you should also realize that perhaps Shakespeare was responding, to the nature of the society of his, at that point, in time.
And now, Dr. Uwasomba, to a very personal question. Which is your best Shakespearean play? My
best Shakespearean play is Julius Caesar.
But why Julius Caesar?
Yeah, because of the political content, of that play. Julius Caesar represents real politic at its best. So that's my best play, and I like reading it every now and then. Or we are behaving like Brutus, Nigeria will not be what it is, today. So leaders deserve and require honor, to operate.
Well, if you can ewe out this moral lesson from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, should it not be the case that Nigerian politicians should perhaps make it a sense of compulsion to sit down with William Shakespeare and read his works?
Well, Nigerian politicians won't be able to do that because they are busy looking for money and they engage in such other frivolous activities. It requires some level of decency. It requires a mind, that is thoroughly honed to be able to sit down to engage texts. Most Nigerian politicians don't have time for serious engagement. They have time to make money at all costs at the expense of the people. And so books are not meant for them.
So what should politicians rather do, Dr. Uwasomba?
Well, I think that our politicians should learn that there is dignity, that it pays to engage books, and that when they have read books, they will be taken away from the nonsensical activities that they are engaged in. They should know that everything is not about money, that books, pay, and it will be good if they can pay attention, to that.
Well, Dr. Uwasomba, in a society like Nigeria, where people do not read, do you see Shakespeare surviving beyond the curriculum?
Shakespeare will survive. It will survive. He has survived. I mean, you have just said Shakespeare, this is 4 centuries ago. People are celebrating him. People are celebrating his works. And so it won't die.
But in this climb, will he survive beyond the curriculum?
He will. He will. Because in spite of what is happening, because I'm hopeful that our society will not die. I'm hopeful that in spite of all the shenanigans going on, that people beyond the curriculum will still read.
But is it not the case that it's only his place that made the curriculum that are most popular in this part of the world?
Yes, of course, because, the curriculum has made it so. They also realize that there are people who even have nothing to do with the discipline, with the curriculum, because of, the noise that they hear from the experts, from people, who have come to it through, these curricular activities. They tend to read. In fact, there are many physicists who are quoting Shakespeare, who have read a lot of Shakespeare, even though they didn't have the opportunity of reading, such plays in primary, secondary, or even in the university system. So there are still people, I'm hopeful, who are interested, in reading literature and works, written by Shakespeare.
Well, let's look at Shakespeare's sonnets. He wrote over 100 of those. What relevance is it really for a society like this?
Oh, it is very. Look at. Shall I compare to Uwasomba's? So yeah. So you then see that even beyond the language, beyond the poeticity of the work, you'll also realize that Shakespeare is talking about the appreciation of beauty, the appreciation of a human being. When human beings are appreciated, when they are seen as God's creation, there will be, the tendency for people to do things that are correct. Okay? And so, when you are reading such works, the essence to promote the vista, of humanity, is there. So, it's very relevant because all that Shakespeare was talking about, all you find, in his works are things that they are things that are within the domain, of a human essence. And so, you can't do away with all the issues, that he has raised.
Well, see how beautifully you eulogize Shakespeare. So how do you feel when some theorists come to say it never existed?
Well, of course, you cannot have such a phenomenal writer without some form of controversy, arising. So Shakespeare was phenomenal. And so if no controversy had arisen, we would have wondered. So a lot of people have said all kinds of things about him. They have ascribed his works, to other writers, and all that. And so, in fact, these controversies make, the man, Shakespeare tick. And so he couldn't but not be controversial. And all important, iconic, figures usually are controversial. And so we shouldn't be surprised, that Shakespeare and his works are drawing, such critical controversies in the world. And I'm saying that these controversies make him and his work tick.
But can we have a William Shakespeare today?
Of course. We have a William Shakespeare. We have our own WS. And there are many other William Shakespeares, coming up. We have Ife Adeni, who has just come up with her own novel. There are a lot of Shakespeares, that Nigeria, Africa, the world, we have more Shakespeares. We have more Shakespeares. And of course, also people will eulogize them. And so, by eulogizing Shakespeare, you are also praising the essence, of art. Because art itself is life, and life is art.
Have you ever imagined world literature without Shakespeare?
Oh, literature would have been empty. I had asked that question before. What would Nigerian literature have been without Soyinka? What would have world literature been, without Shakespeare? It would have been empty. It would have been a humdrum. It would have been something that people would have missed. And so we're happy, that there was Shakespeare and there is Shakespeare. And so that void is not there. And that, makes, literature tick.
So it means that Shakespeare will never die?
He won't die. He cannot die. All works of art cannot die. They live forever. They don't die. And therefore, Shakespeare and his works won't die.
Well, thank you for your time out, Dr. Uwasomba.
Thank you, Ife. I'm grateful.
That was Dr. Chijioke Uwasomba of the Department of English, Obafemi Awolowo University. For those who have taken the patience to read any of William Shakespeare's works, you'll find either his X-ray of history, his language, or his portrayal of human nature fascinating. Some persons who love Shakespeare memorize some of his lines and commit them to heart. It will surprise you that the foremost professor of public health in Nigeria, Professor Adetokunbo Lucas, is a lover of Shakespeare. In this excerpt, he recites lines from one of William Shakespeare's plays, Julius Caesar.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus has told you that Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault. And grievously has Caesar answered it here under leaf of Brutus and the rest. For Brutus is an honorable man, and so are they all honorable men. Come I to speak and Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, great friend, just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. When the poor had cried, Caesar had wept. Ambition should be made of standard stuff. And yet, Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man.
Still in the mood of that rendition by Professor Adetokunbo Lucas, I render my most favorite lines from William Shakespeare, and that is from Act 2, Scene 2 of the work Julius Caesar. And Caesar is speaking here. Cowards die many times before their death. The valiant never taste of death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. William Shakespeare was born on the 26th of April 1564 and he died in April 1616. He is adjudged the greatest dramatist of all times. His works will continue to instruct, for all works of relevance do so. And for us in Nigeria, what a startling coincidence that Wole Soyinka, foremost critic and playwright, our own Nobel laureate, also bears the same initials, WS, with William Shakespeare. Will that be a coincidence with a meaning? Well, I leave you to decode that. On that note, I wrap it up on this week's edition of Book Splash on the Integrity Station Splash 105.5 FM. Remember that this program has been supported by the Booksellers Limited, Association of Nigerian Authors, and the Oyo State Library Board. For comment, you can send your text messages to 0705 439 3302. 0705 439 3302. Or you can send emails to ayadeni@splashfm1055.com. Book Splash will return at 2:30 next week. The sound engineer is Blessed Akum, and my name is Ifelowapo Adeniye. Have a lovely day and bye-bye.